Good evening. Tonight I would like to talk about something that's going on in the Senate this week, and that is the National Defense Authorization Act, and a provision that's part of that act that has been drawing a lot of attention in a lot of news agencies. And when I heard about it, uh, I was very disturbed to read about it at first and thought that the first article I read that couldn't possibly be correct of what that person had been saying. But as I read more information about it, and I commented on this last night, I am just I'm completely perplexed at what is going on in the U.S. Senate with this provision that I would call "What's in a Name," if you want to go back to Shakespeare. Because as I understand this provision, it would allow the United States military to go to someone's house, pick them up, uh, possibly give them one hearing, but no due process, and detain them for as long as they wish with no recourse to the person that they picked up. Now, that's sort of a simplified version of what I've been reading in the act, because I think the text of most of it or all of it is on the web. But the thing that shocks me the most is that in a room full of lawyers, I'm talking the Senate chambers, that it doesn't appear that there's very many of them there that question the complete seeming unconstitutionality of something like this. So I had to ask myself a question. Is it that those people involved, and I think it was John McCain is one of the authors of this provision. Lindsey Graham, I think, is also involved in it, which completely disappoints me because in the past he's actually made some sense on some things, not all, but on some. But is it that these men and women do not understand the ramifications of this act? Or is it being purposefully done? I expect the latter, and it's very disturbing because we go to what's in a name. The U.S. government, under this provision, could name you as a terrorist or a terror suspect in order to be able to send the military to your house to pick you up and hold you forever, hypothetically. So by someone or some panel somewhere deciding that you may be a terror suspect, you have lost all of your constitutional rights as a U.S. citizen based on someone changing your name from U.S. citizen to terror suspect, eliminating all the protections and all of the due process in the Constitution. And I find that deeply disturbing because this is, to quote a phrase, certainly a slippery slope. Anyone with any reasonable person could see where this could go and how it could be further expanded upon. And I have to tell you that, remember, all of these comments are just one person's opinion, but I grew up basically following the Republican Party and then became disillusioned with the Republicans over the last 20 years. I had a lot of respect for Ronald Reagan at the time, and I was one of the people that was completely bamboozled by the Reaganomics, the trickle-down theory, which now in the light of full day and in hindsight, of course, we find does not work at all. But in the last several years, I have to tell you, I have no great love for the Democratic Party either. Although I agree with a lot of their issues, they bring a lot of baggage with them also. And in prior, it was just a case of, I think, who was carrying less baggage with them. That may have made me a Republican. Now, as an independent conservative, I'll give due to either party when they express reasonable, common sense ideas that respect the groundings of this country in the Constitution. But I see the Republican Party just completely going off the rails over the last several years. They're shamelessly pro large business, shamelessly against the rights of regular Americans and the working class, I'll call them, play too much to the extreme right wing of the Republican Party. And then this is one of my comments about the Democrats too. So often you find them playing or buckling under pressure from the extreme left of the Democratic Party. But once again, very, very deeply disturbing. And I applaud the Democrats that stood up in the Senate. And once again, no love lost for President Obama either, but he's threatened a veto. I consider President Obama not the strongest president that we've had in the last many years. I don't know if he has the courage to veto that, but we'll see. So going along with this, what does it say about, for example, Bradley Manning? That, as you probably know, is an Army, lower-ranking Army individual that had given a lot of privileged communication to WikiLeaks, and they got leaked all over the world and caused a lot of consternation for several governments, etc. And I think he's still being detained. I don't know if he even has a hearing or trial set or anything like that, but I think, well, if this provision of the National Defense Authorization Act goes through and is passed into law, even without that, if they're holding this soldier without his due process, of course, now he falls under the Uniform Code of Military Justice because he's in the military. But if this is his situation without that bill being passed, how much worse would it be if the bill was passed? The next thing I want to talk about tonight is another further, I think, erosion of, and I won't call it a right, but, well, I don't know what you would call it, but I want to talk about American Airlines, which it was in the news all over this morning and almost all the outlets that they're going to declare bankruptcy. Well, as I read further about that, I was like, American Airlines at one point was I think one of the best airlines out there. And now they're engaged, it looks like, in just funny business and blatant union busting tactics by doing this, because I understand that they're sitting on $4 billion thereabouts in cash. Their balance sheets all look good. Everything else looks good. And then once again, reading further, I find that starting in about 2003, a lot of companies are doing this as a method to break or bust unions or invalidate or eliminate union contracts. And I want to go back to what I had said a couple of weeks before. And this provides a perfect example of what I was talking about. You have a corporation, and of course the people at the top of the corporation will tell you that their responsibility is to the stockholders. Well, their responsibility, in my opinion, is partially to the stockholders, or in a large part maybe, but their responsibility is to all avenues of and all venues of their oversight of this company. And that includes the people that work for the company. So if the responsibility of the leadership of a company is only to provide monetary benefit to the stockholder without regard to the people actually producing the value of that company, you can see that equation will not work, and ultimately you'll have the downfall of that company. Short-sightedness versus long-sightedness. And we see, and many of the, and probably most of the major business publications have highlighted companies that provide very well for their employees, and they are the most successful companies. Google, for example. Well, I can think of many examples, but just we'll take that as the point. So you have a large company, and then you have the workers in the company, the employees. The resources of the company are large, if they're a big company, and with HR trained HR staff and corporate attorneys, etc. People that went to business school and etc. And then you have the employees. If the employee stands by himself or herself, when the employee, when it's time to decide fair compensation for the employee and benefits and workplace rules, force safety and things like that, if it's an individual sitting across the table from the corporation, we can see how this is not going to work very well, and it's going to be, it's going to be a take it or leave it proposition to the employee. Well, some may say that that's perfectly understandable. It's our company, and if you don't want to work there, go work for somebody else. On the other side, though, there should be a balance, I think, that, and I think unions serve a very useful role. As we found going back almost 100 years ago. But the role of the unions have been very steadily eroded over the last many years, and I think if a company is going to say blatantly that we're going to pay you as little as possible and give you as few benefits as possible and provide only the minimum necessary for you to be able to do the work that we want you to do in order to increase the value of the company to the